afternoon. I'm Reverend Liz Luoma, the minister here at Unity Santa Fe. And today we come together to remember and to celebrate the life of Daniel, as we all knew him in different capacities. I did not have the pleasure of getting to know Daniel. I've spoken to a few, and I've gotten a little snapshot of who he was, and I believe he continues to be on the other side of the veil. So I want to welcome you all here. It may seem strange to some people that we would actually celebrate during a time of grieving. But to celebrate Daniel and his life and all he brought to our lives is to give him appreciation. I want to welcome all Daniel's family and friends, those that could be here today, those that are in our Zoom room, and anyone who couldn't necessarily be present on any way today. We know that you're all here in the spirit of love. So in the midst of our sadness and missing Daniel, your memories of your times with him offers consolation. Funerals, memorial services, celebration of life services enable us to share our memories collectively and to celebrate the lives of Daniel, whom we've loved and been loved by. Each person, at some point, we all have an expiration date. We all have a date when we leave our physical bodies, but we believe that life is eternal and that we release the body and continue on the other side of the veil. So now I'm going to do a short prayer, and each of you in your own way, according to your faith or your beliefs, simply join me. In this moment, we recognize Divine Spirit, that which is breathing us. We take a breath in together collectively, consciously, and we let it go. And as we notice our breath now, we realize that we don't make ourselves breathe, that there is a life force and source that is breathing us, that each of us is an individualized expression of that one life, of that spirit that breathes us now. We believe that one life is love, infinite, divine love, eternal love. It surrounds us, fills us, and flows through us. And so we open our hearts to that love. We open our minds. We open to the love in this room. We open to that spirit of love called Daniel Koenig. We celebrate his presence in physical form and beyond the physical form. And so we just release that, and we give thanks for today's service and all the sharing and caring that is coming forth. And so it is. So it is that each of us have something called life that is breathing us, as I just spoke. Being alive is a common experience, and so is the release, which we call death or passing on. It's when we release the body. Both life and death are pretty much a mystery on the most part, and we navigate life as best we can. And then we release, and we move into another dimension. We know that death is also an opportunity, or passing on, an opportunity to reflect on our own lives and to realize none of us know when it's our day to release the body and check out. It makes me know that I just want to live fully. As I believe Daniel did, he lived life to the fullest in the little bit I heard about him. And we'll be hearing more from all of you or whoever cares to share. So let us just recognize Daniel could very well be in this room with us, and I believe he is. I believe his spirit is right here, and he is smiling, and he is so grateful for your presence and for your love and for this opportunity to be together. He loves you as he always has, and we know he's also free. So we give thanks for this celebration of life of Daniel. And now we're going to hear from some of Daniel's family more about him, and we'll all probably learn more about Daniel than we did when we walked in here today. Did you want to go ahead, Mark? Or Chris or Felipe? Philippe, I got it. Philippe Koenig. And this is the brother. Come on up.
Hello, everyone. First of all, I would like to thank Daniel for making this occasion possible, because I think he richly deserves it. I'm going to talk about Daniel's childhood, because so many of you know him as an adult, whereas I am uniquely qualified to speak about his childhood. I mean, truly uniquely qualified. No one else on earth could do it, or could have done it. And it'll take a few explanations to explain why that is. Because we were born, Daniel, I, and our younger brother Thierry, who died of cancer in 2010, just before the war. And then the war came along and it upset just totally everything. And to make a long story short, between 1942 and 1950, for me, from the age of 4 to the age of 12, for Dan from the age of 5 to 13, we were joined at the hip. We moved every single year into 7 separate households, sometimes with people we had never met before, who didn't know us, we didn't know them. So I'll touch a little bit on our lives on that a little on, but let me just kind of set it a moment's remark about how we came to that place. Our parents were a French mother, Eliane, and an Austrian father, Gerhard, both from good families, well-educated, attractive people who met in the mid-30s, fell in love through a chance meeting in Bavaria, in Oberammergau, the Passion Play city, in 1934 about. They married in 1935, and between then and 1939, they proceeded to have 3 sons, 3 children. The last of them, Thierry, was born in May of 1939, and within a year, everything had gone topsy-turvy. Our father, who was Austrian living in France, had been arrested by the French government, not for being a Nazi, but for possibly being a member of a communist fifth column. And he went from there to join the French Foreign Legion. And he went from there to a hospital for people with tuberculosis, where he died a few years later. And we never saw him 2 years after that. And my mother lived primarily in Paris, being unable to care for 3 children during these conditions. Our younger brother, Thierry, was placed with one of my mother's sisters, who effectively all but adopted him. He lived with them for 10 years. Meanwhile, Daniel and I went off on our own, holding hands, basically. We spent a winter period with the parents of some of the people on Zoom, I think, my good cousin Monique and her siblings. But from there, we were put on a refugee train because Monique's parents lived near Le Havre, a major port in Normandy, and it was feared that an invasion everyone expected, would come there. So we were sent about 100 miles south, a lot closer to where the invasion actually took place, to a town called Nogent-Rotrou, where we were taken up by two women who loved us. A real home. For a year until after the invasion, and then through weird ways I will not explain, we found ourselves in Paris at the crossing of Rue Michel-Ange and Rue Claude Lorrain, watching the American troops enter Paris. And then from there, we went to another aunt and uncle. Then we went back for another year with those wonderful women who were sisters, retired teachers. And from there, we went to Germany, where my mother had gotten a job working with the French government with the occupied territories, the French part of the occupied territories, which was not a good year. She was very depressed because of my father's death. She had fallen in love with her boss, a very wonderful army colonel who died of a heart attack in her arms. So she was totally distraught. And Daniel, who was very, very loyal, was distraught. So from there, we went to boarding school. I at 9, he at 10, still joined at the hip. And a year later, since he was not thriving, as people said, he went to spend a year with the parents of someone else on Zoom, namely Christian, Dominique, Jacques, and Brigitte Duval, while I was left all alone in boarding school, and that was the nadir of my childhood. But over these years, we were each other's principal support. Daniel was always strong, supportive, gentle, kind, quite wonderful. I can't say more than that about that. Besides that, he was a wonderful artist. He drew beautifully. And when we came to the US, through my mother remarrying and collaring her 3 children, taking them to the United States, we went from a Dickensian boarding school to Napa Valley, where we were very, very well treated, and things got a lot better. But there too, Dan was a wonderful support for me. His friends were my friends. He was a lot of fun. He was a wonderful tennis player. He learned music, learned to play the trumpet, and at one point was one of the 4 trumpets for the Berkeley High School concert band, the members of which were a fellow called Jim Farnsworth, a wonderful trumpet player, who went directly, I think, to the Army band. And there was Daniel, the next chair. There was his buddy. Good grief, I'm having a brain fog. May come back in a minute or two. And then lastly, a fellow called, I'm having a brain dead on his name too, but has been for the last 60 years the bass guitarist for the Grateful Dead. And so Dan, throughout his life, was always so kind, so gentle, so loyal. He was very loyal to my mother as she took ill and died here in Santa Fe, up in the hills. And I will never forget the kindnesses that he had for me over the years. Thank you.
Thank you, Felipe. I kept wanting to, it's Mexico. I keep wanting to put an accent on it. 2 pieces of logistics. There is Kleenex in the chair in front of you, if you have a row in front of you, just so you know that underneath the chair, there's a little space in case. And also the restrooms, I didn't let you know, but if you walk right out this door and turn left, they're just down the hall. So it's good to know these couple little things. Kathleen, were you prepared to speak next? Okay.
Good afternoon. I'm not sure I can get through this, so I have a backup over here. So for all of you, I don't know if you know who I am. I'm Kathleen, and I first met Dan in 1997 at a Santa Fe Community Orchestra rehearsal. I remember it as if it were yesterday. The buzz that night among the flute and clarinet players was, "Did you hear? Dan is back in town." And I'm like, who's Dan? I wondered, and then suddenly, from out of nowhere, a bearded man wearing a beret, carrying an oboe case, greeted me with a friendly smile and a twinkle in his eye. "Hi, I'm Dan." He didn't speak in French at that point because I wasn't speaking in French at that point. Little did I know that that first encounter would change the trajectory of my life. Our first date was spent making oboe reeds, followed by eating a tarte tatin, which is apple pie in French, that he made in his toaster oven. And I have to tell you, it was divine, and the first of many French baked treats he would make for me over the years. Dan and I would go on to make, pardon the cliche, beautiful music together, both literally and figuratively, for the next 25 years of our lives together. Even though we only lived for a brief time together under the same roof, we were always connected. And I am hard-pressed to think of a day when we didn't speak to each other. We may have lived in separate houses, but we did not, and I have to emphasize that, lead separate lives. And speaking of houses, we both left our creative marks on each other's homes, as my daughter will attest to. I decorated and helped him renovate his home in the French country style, and I helped him design his second house. And in turn, he helped me with countless projects in my own home. There is not one room, not one corner in which Dan didn't put his carpentry, design, and engineering skills to work. But he was more than a handyman. He could take any of my ideas, for which there were many, and bring them to fruition. Dan always encouraged me to take risks and follow my heart. When I need my glasses. When I wanted to learn French, he made it possible for me to spend 2 amazing years in Provence. The adventures that we had while living my dream life in France are really too numerous to mention here. When I decided to adopt a child in 2006, I want you to stand up. Go on, stand up. Because she was really little, and some people who are, have not seen her since she was like 7 or 8 years old. She's now 22. So anyway, when I decided to adopt this beautiful child in 2006, he never talked about the negatives. And I can tell you there were many people who did. Many people tried to discourage me, but not Dan. He only talked about the positives. He held my hand throughout the difficult year of paperwork and anxiety, for which there was a lot, leading up to my departure to India to get my beautiful daughter, Nina. She was 7 years old at the time. Although I traveled to India alone, Dan talked me through the obstacles I encountered thousands of miles away, the panic calls. He was my only support system. And when Nina and I finally surmounted all the hurdles in India, Dan was the first person to greet us at the Albuquerque airport when Nina first set foot in New Mexico. From that day forward, Dan participated in raising Nina as if she were his own daughter. We spent every holiday together, traveled together, and lived the day-to-day trials and tribulations as any family does. He picked Nina up from school when I was working. He gave her snacks at his house, reminiscent of the snacks he got as a little boy in France. He helped with homework and 4-H and science projects. He was a great influence on developing her interest in science and math. And although she's not going to speak today, she is in pre-vet right now. She wants to become a veterinarian, and she does really well on her physics exams, which I know has been a great influence there. He willingly accepted the role of godfather when she made her communion and sponsored her for her confirmation. He helped support her all throughout her Catholic school education and beyond. And contrary to what a lot of people believe, he actually did enjoy going to the Catholic Church. He was always thrilled when she did well with difficult science and math classes in both high school and college. He came to every band and orchestra concert, ballet recital, ice skating competition, basketball game, swimming lessons, to name a few. Although he was not legally Nina's father, he was in some ways more than a father. He wore many hats, and all throughout he loved and supported Nina and me. I understand the true meaning of unconditional love, thanks to Dan. Despite his age, Raising a child in his 70s and 80s, he never once complained. He was devoted to me and Nina in a way that very few people, even those in our own families, understood. For the past 10 years, we collaborated on teaching French. There was a constant exchange of ideas to improve our teaching skills and develop curricula together. He also played an integral role in my newspaper business, which was kind of a crazy business, editing and writing articles and helping Nina roll, and this is the truth, 8,000 newspapers every 2 months for 11 years. He drove me all around the South Side while I tossed the newspapers on driveways. It was truly a family business, which I wouldn't have been able to do without him. Dan was my best friend. When I got upset, he stayed calm. When I was worried, he assured me everything would be okay. When I wasn't sure what to do, he gave me the perspective I needed to figure it out. We had 25 years of a very special relationship that did not follow society's conventions and norms. Instead, we created our relationship day by day, year by year, and did so in our own unique way. We improvised and made it up as we went along. We broke the rules. Life with Dan was an adventure. He gave me the experience of being understood, supported, and loved. Dan's amazing ability to give is still with us. His spirit lives on in the stories people are sharing and how he touched their lives. They are testaments of his kindness. As for myself, life will never be the same without him. I love you and miss you, Dan. I was and will remain your loving Fufu. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathleen. So Mark or Chris, did you want to come up next? Okay, Mark Koenig.
Great. It's great to be with you. Thank you for coming. And to everyone on Zoom, thank you too. If I had to pick a couple words to describe Dan, a couple of them are French, bon vivant, which means, glasses, good. A person who enjoys luxurious things in life, especially good food and drink, a man about town. I would say he's jovial, cheerful and good-humored, jolly and merry. And that he has a joie de vivre, literally the joy of living. So as we reflect on Dan's passing, it also behooves me to create what his life furthers for myself and for all of us. And that, I guess, is the task for each of us. To really create what Dan is for us in our hearts, where the memory of Dan lives now. So those of you who knew him would probably say he had a temperament stereotypical of an engineer, very intelligent, fairly introverted, analytical. But if you knew him well, you would know that everything else about him was outside that stereotype. He was a foodie, a passionate musician, a very talented woodworker, photographer, filmmaker, painter, sculptor, gardener, and loving father. So to him, I owe my appreciation of art, of music, of fine foods and wines. He taught me to appreciate quality. I remember when I was about 12 years old, After he and my mother, Nadine, divorced, we would make omelets together at his home off Palace Avenue, which is his first home after the divorce. And there would be an implied challenge to always make the next one better than the last, more delicious, always improving, always in competition with ourselves. Dan had a really nice omelet pan. He showed me how to stir the eggs while the butter was heating in the pan, and the timing was critical. The time to add the eggs into the hot butter was just when it started to brown. Not when it turned brown, that would be too late. It was just when it started to show a little color darker than yellow, but not before it started to brown. That was too early, right? So I remember a few years later, Dan spent a year in France, something he did several times in his life, and I visited him there one summer when I was about 15 years old. And we went to Le Mont Saint-Michel, an island castle just off the coast of Normandy. And on the island, there's a I think it's three-star, restaurant called La Mère Poulard, the mother hen. And we ordered an omelet, a plain omelet. It was made with 8 eggs. And we watched the chef whipping and whipping and whipping the eggs in with a big whisk in a big copper bowl for at least 5 minutes, a long time, an eternity it seemed. But it meant that when the eggs went into the pan, they weren't just mixed, they were frothy. So the big, long-handled copper pan that was used to cook over an open flame, it was tilted every now and then, so the flames would come up and lick over the frothy eggs. And needless to say, the omelet was amazing. And our omelet making bar had just instantly raised to a new standard. We never forgot that. So that's an example of the type of passion that with which Dan approached certain things in life. So I share with you a poem from Rainer Maria Rilke. Actually, it's not a poem. I'm just saying a quote from him. The quote is, "Love and death are the great gifts that are given to us. Mostly, they are passed on unopened." So Dan has given us the gift of his death. Do we pass it on unopened, or shall we open it? What could it mean to open the great gift of Dan's death? Well, okay, maybe we can come back to the opening the gift of Dan's death a little bit later. We can start with opening the gift of Dan's love. I can say, in a somewhat backward sense, I owe my willingness to love fully and deeply to my dad. And when I say it's in a backward sense, it's because when I was about 17 years old, Dan went through a very painful breakup with the first girlfriend he had after his divorce with my mom. I was 17, and I remember Dan going through this breakup and having a very broken heart. I remember that his pain hit me so hard that I swore to myself at the age of 17 that I would never, ever fall in love with anyone, if there was any chance that it could result in my having a broken heart as painful as what I was witnessing in Dan. I never wanted to feel that much pain. This is why I say it was backwards. I swore I didn't word it that way, but I would never open the gift of love. I would let it pass unopened for the rest of my life if it meant that I could avoid that pain. But years later, he was still alive. And that heartbreak didn't kill him. In fact, he was just as passionate, just as jovial, just as much of a bon vivant, with just as much joie de vivre as ever. In fact, probably more. So when I was about 30 years old, I finally opened the gift. I fell in love, and sure enough, had my heart broken as bad as, in fact, probably worse than Dan's was. And the experience has made me stronger and even more capable of loving and committing to love. So the last story, is this the last story? I guess that's not the last story. The next story I want to share is this. Around the same time that I was so in love that I was willing to quit my job, move out of state, into the unknown, into the pursuit of love with no sure means of making a living, Dan was also in a transition stage. We were living in California. The graphic software company for which he was making awesome pressure-sensitive digital paintbrushes in Northern California went belly up. He was out of a job. He'd just turned 60. And no one in the job market was willing to hire a 60-year-old nuclear physicist turned computer software engineer unless they could pay him a minimum wage, and which he was unwilling to accept. So he moved back to his studio in Santa Fe at the end of Huddleston Street. At the same time, I was going to move to go try on a new life with love. And we both packed up all our belongings in one U-Haul trailer and moved east, out of California, dropping me off in Boulder and him returning to Santa Fe. So during that road trip, we were in two cars. I was driving the U-Haul, and I think he was driving my car. We invented mind chess. While driving, we imagined a chessboard, picked a color, white or black, turned on our walkie-talkies. This was 1997. Cell phones didn't quite exist yet. You know, we each knew a couple of people who owned one of those very expensive car phones, but neither of us did. So we then proceeded to make our opening moves. So we're talking to each other on a walkie-talkie. Pawn to king 4. Pawn to king 4. Pawn to queen 4. Pawn takes pawn. Knight to queen bishop 3, etc., etc., etc. We went on for 20 moves, more moves, and you know, until maybe it was, knight to king 7 check. Oh, rook takes knight. What do you mean rook takes knight? There was no rook there. Sure there was, but we moved it back. It was 15 moves ago. No, 15 moves ago you castled. Your rook is over your bishop won, not king won. Anyway, so we would argue back and forth, and if one of us couldn't go back all the way to the beginning and explain how we got to that bishop or rook either being there or not, we gave up. And we usually gave up, but that was so much fun. So now I return back to the awkward question. What could it mean to open the great gift of Dan's death? And I'm laughing because even though I have more notes here, this is where I'm going to stop and improvise. Because it's the same thing, the gift of love and the gift of death. They bring us to the same place. Dan, when he was probably 80, would share with me that he cries so much more. Something had transitioned in him, opened up in him, but he was much more easily able to access those emotions. Sad movie, touching comment by someone, just a thought of someone he cares for, he loves. So maybe for me, I mean, for each of us, it's different. What is the gift of Dan's death? For me, I think it's the access to these emotions, to love. So I stand here crying, thanks to Dan. It's a gift. It's a gift that I can access the love that he had, the love that he shared. And that's all I have. Thank you.
Thank you, Mark. I think there isn't a dry eye in here, including mine. So thank you for your heartfelt share. Chris Koenig.
I have a couple of stories to tell too. But before I start, I want to take a minute to express my extreme gratitude and appreciation to my brother Mark, my sister-in-law Kathleen, and my nephew Luke for opening up their home, getting of themselves and their love, and providing hospice care for Dan in the last weeks of his life. I know that he was much happier there than he would have been anywhere else. Thank you. By way of camping trips and picnics and trips out in the woods with his camera so he could take pictures of a single flower or a field of flowers with the mountains in the background, or frogs on the edge of a beaver pond or the full moon, he gave me an appreciation of nature and discovery and science, a love and curiosity about animals and astronomy and geology. I learned that logic and reason and what was later defined as critical thinking and the use of the scientific method were tools to the truth, how the universe was formed, how our planet was formed, and how old they were. If I was not satisfied with answers in the great book of fairy tales, those are my words, not his, math could give me the answer that I could believe. How the shape of the wing of an airplane could create enough lift to lift all the tonnage of that metal and cargo to allow it to float on the air. How the friction allowed the tires of your car or motorcycle to get enough traction to turn at speed. How exceeding the limits of traction caused your motorcycle to slide. How I love to play with the limits of traction and slide my motorcycle deliberately, going ever faster, pushing the limits of physics until I went too far and landed on my head. I didn't witness this next story, but I first learned about it when I was a young adult. I've heard it many times. I think I was in the 4th or 5th grade, and we were sitting around the dinner table, and my dad asked what I learned in school that day. And he was very dissatisfied with my answers regarding math. I don't remember what I told him, but he wanted a meeting with my math teacher. And he went to the school and met with the teacher and the principal about the math curriculum. And he asked why 5 minus 3 was a wrong answer. Why wasn't it -2? Why were they not teaching negative numbers? After all, there's just as many negative numbers as there are positive ones. Why were they not teaching the special power of the number 0? 0 doesn't mean a lot. It means nothing, in fact, when added or subtracting to something. But any number multiplied or divided by 0 equals 0. No other number has that power. I was just a kid. I don't know if he got any results, but he tried. And I don't know of any other dad who tried to improve his child's education by taking on the school principal. How cool is that? Thank you.
Thank you, Chris. I now have a short poem to share with you, and it's called Afterglow. I'd like the memory of me to be a happy one. I'd like to leave an afterglow of smiles when life is done. I'd like to leave an echo whispering softly down the ways of happy times, of laughing times, and bright and sunny days. I'd like the tears of those who grieve to drive before the sun, thinking of happy memories that I leave when life is done. So now I want to, first of all, just thank Philippe, Kathleen, Mark, and Chris for your heartfelt sharing. I know I've already gained a bigger picture and have a greater understanding of who Daniel has been in physical form. So we're going to invite folks to come up and do more sharing, an open sharing. This is the time that you may share your memories of Daniel, the funny times, the touching times, the hard times, what he meant to you, what he continues to mean to you. And as you share your memories and experiences of Daniel, each of us will even get a greater picture of who Daniel was and continues to be on the other side of the veil. And I have a couple folks that I know that we're going to begin this part of open sharing. And Cynthia, ready to come on up, Cynthia. I can believe the song is Here, There, Everywhere.
So before I say anything else, I just want to say thank you. Thank you for being here to celebrate Dan's beautiful life. And I just want to share that as his daughter-in-law, I had the best father-in-law ever. So welcoming. I instantly had a family. To me and accepted me for who I was. And in that space of family, I got to be the best daughter-in-law to him, expressed in music. I got to be with him playing my violin at his invitation to play in the orchestra with him. He attended our son Luke's soccer games and always supported us through many trials. And I think the last thing that I just want to share is the gift, and thank you, Chris, and Kathleen, for the decision to have him be with us. It was hard. We had no idea how to really take care of him, but we did the very best we could, and it was through his graciousness that we got to spend beautiful last moments. And I just remember the week before he passed, and I just knew something was happening because I was distracted, couldn't focus on work, simple things. I thought, what is going on? And then I realized that it was time. It was time to let him go. And one thing that I actually thought in a moment was, could it really be possible to have joy in the midst of sadness and fear in his passing? And when I actually let him go, when I actually said goodbye, there was an incredible space where I could actually just be free to be with him and to have beautiful moments taking care of him, having coffee with him, washing him, kissing his face. I never got to kiss his face before, that week before he passed. So when he did pass, and it was beautiful, gentle, peaceful, I was and am in the presence of joy. So I want to share a dance, because Dan always supported my dancing and my creativity. So Dad, this is for you.
Making each day of the year, changing my life with one wave of his hand. Nobody can deny that there's something there. Running my hands through his hair, both of us thinking how good it can be. Someone is speaking, but he doesn't know she's there. I want him everywhere, and if he's beside me, I know I need never care. But to love him is to meet him everywhere, knowing that love is to share. Each one believing that love never dies, watching his eyes and hoping I'm always there to be there. And everywhere, here, there, and I want him everywhere, and if he's beside me, I know I need never care. Oh, but to love him is to meet him everywhere, knowing that love is to share. Each one believing that love never dies, watching his eyes, hoping I'm always there to be there. And everywhere, here, there, and everywhere.
Okay. Well, that was so beautiful. Thank you, Cynthia. No words, just beautiful. Thank you. Felipe Walfort, if I said it right.
Thank you. Thank you very much. I will talk on behalf of my family, my brother, who is with a Zoom in Savannah, Georgia, listening to us. Some of you might have known Daniel through Los Alamos. Some of you through the music. Some of you through the French discussion group he had. As far as we are concerned, I would say 1977. We arrived from Albuquerque to Santa Fe, and we met him at a French pastry shop. That's how far, 45 years. In 1978, my brother opened the creperie, who later on was known as Chez Edouard. By the account of Mark, you understand the Epicurean Daniel we all knew, the love for the food. So let me tell you, between the French pastry shop and between Chez Edouard, countless dinner. Daniel was a wonderful cook. We were invited at his house. And that's why I want to pay tribute to him, because that friendship we develop into like a family bond. Daniel went to France. He paid a visit, a weekend, at my mother-in-law in the Pyrenees, at my wife's best friend in the Basque Country. We play soccer together. We play pétanque together. Countless party. So I just wanted to say that, it's a feeling, and the feeling I have, it's a feeling of a man who, when you think about it, was exceptional. So even-tempered, never a word higher than another. Some people talk about a glass half full, half empty. Let me tell you, his was full all the time. He was always positive, always nice. And that's why I wanted to tell you, that's Daniel, I remember. A year and a half ago, we live now in Albuquerque, but a year and a half ago, we were house-sitting in Santa Fe for a friend on the back down West Alameda. And I walk a lot lately. So I was walking around the river, and I end up crossing by Gonzalez School. And I saw a yellow jacket, the back. And I approached and said, can I cross the road? And he turned around and said, Philippe, Daniel. That was it. That was the last time I saw him. We had a 10-minute conversation, always the same, always. Some people are gifted from way above. He was one of them. And we all know that. So one day, in a conversation, we talked about reincarnation. And he told me, I don't believe in reincarnation. For me, it's a continuation of life through my kids. What a beautiful thing to say. Personally, I believe it's behind the veil. we don't die. That's my personal belief. Our soul goes on. But I respect, because every time I will see Mark, and if I see Chris, I know I will see him. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, Philippe. It is now open share time, so if you're called to share a memory, a thought, now is the time.
My name is Lynn, and I was a member of the Saturday Breakfast Club that Nadine belonged to. And there's only 2 recollections I have of meeting Daniel. One was in the Torreon Park, because I live on West Alameda in a small co-housing community right close by. And a celebration of neighborhood had been happening, and there was a little picnic sort of in the Torreon Park. And that was the first time I met Daniel. And I didn't know who he was at first. He was just this wonderful guy, and I thought, I'm gonna get to know this guy. And I found out that he was Nadine's ex, and he was Mark's dad, and he was Chris's dad. And I just, was enveloped by that positive energy in a very short period of time. So I'm so happy to have heard you guys tell me more about him, because it was just a glimpse that I had. And thank you for multiplying that for me. And the second time I was over at, oh gosh, what was the name of that Brazilian meat place that was open for a while? It was a great place to eat. Ziggy was the name of the owner. He was from Morocco, I think. And I had gone there several times because I loved, and I wasn't eating much meat at that time, but I did at that place. And I was there with a friend, and all of a sudden I saw Nadine coming in, and this guy that I had met, I thought, well, wait a minute, I thought that was her ex. And so a little bit later, I went over to say hi, and Nadine explained that we are celebrating our birthdays. They both had birthdays in October. And just that wonderful connection that the two of them still had was marvelous. It fed my soul and my belief in the ability of people to continue to be connected even after divorce, or even after some kind of split up, even after death. Even after death. Thank you for the dance. And thank you, Dan, for meeting me a couple times.
Hi, good afternoon. I really wasn't prepared to do this, but my name is Kimberly. I am a hospice chaplain, and I had the honor to be with Daniel and his family through his end days. The one thing I remember about him most was his smile. Though he was in an incredible amount of pain, he never once complained. We talked about the Bible, we talked about God, we talked about learning chess, which I really, really wish that we would have had time. We talked about his love for creme brulee. And Santa Fe, we have that in common because I grew up in Santa Fe. And actually, Mark and I graduated from rival high schools the same year. We were supposed to be at the same high school reunion this year, but I didn't show. I do remember that the weekend before he passed, I was getting ready to go see my granddaughter in Phoenix. And it was about the time where he was kind of nonverbal, but man, he still had that smile on his face. So I leaned over and I, was holding his hand, and I gave him a kiss on the head, and I said, hey, don't go anywhere till I get back. Well, he didn't listen to me. And when I look back, it's probably a good thing, because I remember his smile and I remember his peace the most. So the one thing I am taking away from his gift of his death is I am not going to be afraid to open that gift of love. because he was an amazing man, and I just kept sitting there saying, can I have one? Can I have one? But I was so blessed to get to know him and the family, and we always made his visits the last because he brought me the most peace. And I began to think, who is ministering to who here? But he was an incredible man. It was an incredible experience. I just really wish I would have gotten to know him sooner, but actually through all of this, I feel like I've known him forever. Thank you.
I am Ron Miller. It was my pleasure over the last 10 to 15 years to join Dan and others in, we didn't formally name it as the Wednesday lunch group, but we tended to meet here in town, mostly retirees from Los Alamos National Laboratory, and most of whom live in Santa Fe in their retirement and could get together at lunch. I remember one such lunch, Nina came at Dan's invitation. I don't know if it was more than once, but at least once. And we would tend to discuss world affairs or reminisce about scientific items that took place at the lab. We didn't work together at the lab, but all of us in the group worked at the lab. Most of the people in that group are older than I and have also passed as recently as a few months ago, in the case of Andre Michidon. And there was, in the photos that were shown here, I don't know if they've been annotated or otherwise identified to the family, but there's photos of Charles Barnett, Bob Krakowski, who are also in the group, and then a group photo from a few months ago in the summer, I think, taken by a retired laboratory photographer in the concourse of the DeVargas Mall, 5 of us in the group, who he happened to be passing through doing his photography things and recognized his group as probably Los Alamos retirees or refugees. So he took a photo, and that photo is included in the collection there. So again, it was a good group to have lunch with, and it's a dwindling group, but we certainly will miss Daniel. He sent an email that he was having health issues, unspecified, and moving down to Albuquerque with Mark. So that was the last word we had by email of his condition. And he didn't tell us what the condition was, but and it certainly sounded serious in the email. And we hope and I believe that Mark took good care of him with all of the others in the family in his last days. Thank you.
Hi, my name's Bonnie, and I was a teacher here in Santa Fe for many, many, many years. And I loved French, still love French, and I'm still struggling with it. And Daniel, as I knew him, had this little group, this conversation group that met every Monday night. And I went to that, but I could only do it in the summer because I also sing in several choruses, and our rehearsals were on Monday night in Albuquerque. So when I couldn't come to French anymore, Danielle said, well, why don't I just give you some lessons? You can just meet with me. And I did that, and I did that for 5 years. Even after moving to Albuquerque, I still would drive up here, have my lesson with Danielle, and then drive back. And then there was a couple funny stories. One, he asked me why I liked French so much. And I told him a story that when I was, I guess, about 11 or 12, my family was in the only air-conditioned room in our house in Oklahoma City. And I was leaving the room for something, and my dad said, Bonnie, je t'adore. And I thought he was saying shut the door with a French accent. And from then on, I just knew that I was going to learn French. And so he and I would we laughed. You know what it's like when someone is learning a new language and some of the horrible mistakes they make, saying something they absolutely did not mean to say. And so when that would happen, we just go, je t'adore. the other thing was we would talk, just the two of us, we would pick these topics, philosophy or games or music, and he taught me so many words that just came out in our conversations one-on-one. And I taught him a game called Wizard, a card game called Wizard, and that he said you two wouldn't play. But the directions were in French, English and French, so I decided to read them in French. And I learned new things about bidding in this card game through reading them in French that I didn't know. Lastly, he taught me some words that, well, some sort of nastier words when we would discuss politics. And so I think mostly we laughed a whole lot. And I will sorely miss him. Even during the pandemic, we had our lessons every week on Zoom. So I'm glad to be here.
My decision to speak is very much last minute. But my name is Chantal, and I met Dan through my husband Paul because they were playing music. I think it was the orchestra at first. So we started, that's why we haven't seen Kathleen for how many years, 20 years or something like this. But anyway, the reason we started seeing 20 years prior was because I went through French schools, I grew up in France, and so when we met, it was very much a French conversation, just going between the two of us. And I haven't seen Dan for 20 years, 15 years, 20 years, whatever. And at the time when we first met, we went to his house for dinner one night, and Kathleen was there, and she wanted to learn French, and she loved, oh, you just came back 2 years from Provence. And so I said, oh, if you wanted to I could give you a collection of French books. My memory is going also away. But anyway, so you had some of the French books read for a while. And what is very interesting is I really do not know Dan, but only through the connection of the French language. Because whenever we were together, even when we were at a friend's past celebration of life last year, we end up speaking French, so to speak. And through the limited conversation that we had that were in French, he was talking about his childhood as Philippe was talking about the very first time. And he really basically focused on it. So the connection that struck me right now is that I'm not talking about politics, but this is a country that gives you the opportunity as an immigrant, regardless of what age you came, and that you work, you succeeded, not necessarily in financial ways, but in growing a family like what you have presented today of 2 young children, because I knew of 2 brothers, he was telling me, that we were alone. We came with my mother, and basically we landed in this country. I don't know that you lived in California, that you grew up, that you lived in Berkeley or whatever. I only knew that he went to Berkeley for his graduate school, or even maybe his undergraduate. But what to me, my take home today, is that you have 2 children, and maybe you were 3, but he talked about two brothers who came, basically, you start from 0. But it's not that you make a fortune, dollar-wise, materially speaking, but it's the growth, that the multiplication of the human souls that you were able to bring and to grow and to nurture in this country. And to me, that's a really amazing. And you're not the only one. You're not the only family who did it. A lot of immigrants have succeeded in doing it. But to me, it's a very nice story that you told today. That's all I wanted to say. Thank you.
My name's Geraldine, and I'm a social worker for Amber Care Hospice. And I had the privilege in meeting Dan in his last few weeks of his life and meeting two beautiful, amazing people, and the other two as well. What I remember is the way his son sang the song in French, and the way that Dan, his face just lit up and he tried to voice the song as well. I realized then he was a loving person because you showed that loving care to him at his last few days. We weren't with him very long, but I had the privilege to be there to watch everything and to see how loving you guys were to him. And being able to listen to your stories of your childhood, that touched my heart. And I wish you all the blessings and comfort throughout your life. And just always remember that whatever memories you have with them will always be in your heart. So never, and he'll never forget you either. Okay, and that's all. I just wanted to.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Yes, sorry for my accent. We are in France, we are French. I am a cousin of Daniel, and I was very proud to see Daniel just 1 week before he passed away. And he was, as Mark said, he was jovial. Yes, we had his smile, and he knew at that time that he would pass away very soon. So Daniel has always been like that. He was with us, and we were very pleased to meet him as frequently as we could, even if we were far away from him. So I hope that all of us will remain all the words given by Philip on his childhood, which was very tough. Thank you to all of us, all of you, of being at that celebration.
Let's see. Hi, I'm Barda, and I'm in Albuquerque now, but I lived in Santa Fe for many years. And I was actually renting from Daniel on Huddleston Street in the studio on the side. I don't remember quite how I found out it was available. It must have been through Mark, because we knew each other through Landmark. We had been in the Landmark Wisdom course together with Nadine as well. And so I want to give my love and regards to Nadine. I kind of feel sad that I'm not there. I wish I had been. But when I lived in Huddleston Street on that side studio, I think it was one of the most beautiful place I had lived in Santa Fe. I remember sleeping in the bedroom looking out on the courtyard, and there's this beautiful tree in the courtyard. And there were the apricot trees, which I picked, and I believe Daniel must have picked too, because he pickled them and made his liqueur with them. And I have one bottle of the pickled, liqueur apricots that I'm still intending to get to Mark and Cynthia. I had hoped to bring them to Daniel when I was in Santa Fe, but I didn't get to complete that to give it back to him, because I've had it it was 2003, 2004 when I was living there. And so I just remember the beauty of the space and having, just nice, pleasant, beautiful little interactions with him. And I was very, very, very grateful to be living there in such a beautiful space. It was very comforting to me. And so I guess I feel connected with the family because, since we met through Landmark, but since the early 2000s there I've been connected with Mark and Nadine. And I met Luke in school when I was subbing at the school that he's at in Albuquerque. So it's just a sense of loving connection, and I'm wishing everyone in the family peace and blessings. And I certainly have learned a lot more about Daniel today than I did before. So, and I'm grateful that we have this way to share together. It's so amazing to be able to share with each other this way. With the family from France as well. And so I wish comfort and blessing and peace to everyone in honoring and recognizing what a wonderful life and journey Daniel had. Thank you.
My name is Michael Golden. I met Dan about 40 years ago when the Santa Fe Community Orchestra was in formation. And on and off through the years, we played music together. And we also, at the time that the community orchestra was in formation, we formed a wind quintet, which has the redundant name of the Aeolian Wind Quintet, because Aeolian it means wind. So we played at various places, sometimes for pay, sometimes because we just wanted to play. We played at weddings. And, my memories of Dan are through music. And there's a special relationship if you play in an ensemble, a music ensemble, a special relationship with the people you make music with. It's akin to a kind of love affair in music. Just the working together to make beautiful sounds. And I'm sure there are many of you here today who are also part of the community orchestra over the years, and so you know what I'm talking about. One thing you may not know is that Dan and I also were part of a group that played for the Santa Fe Opera one year. There was a stage band, and Dan and I sort of led that stage band coming up the elevators and across the stage and then down and up the aisle, and it was a military march of some very strange music. But that was very enjoyable, and it was something that once again sort of joined us playing music. And Dan was in and out of the orchestra. I don't know if I was the clarinet player who said to Kathleen, or said out loud that you hear Dan's back. I'm not sure, but yeah. So anyway, we had some very good musical times together. I've learned a lot more about Dan just seeing and listening to the presentations here today, the speakers, and looking at the pictures. Now, some of the pictures brought back memories. There was a picture of the quintet in our much younger years, 40 years ago, but it did bring back memories, and I think this has been a wonderful service of memories, and the heartfelt speakers today. Through those speakers, I've learned a lot more about Dan than I ever knew through music. He was a multi-dimensional man. More than, I say to myself, what have I done? but Dan has done all these things and all these talents he has were just amazing to learn about. So thank you for having this service.
I'll be very brief. My name's Rebecca Heindel, and I'm in music at the end of a piece, especially a military march. There's what's called a stinger. It's just a last little note that happens, and that's what I'm about to say. And the connection, my connection with Daniel is threefold. He's the first musician I met when I moved here in 1981, and we drove together to Albuquerque to audition for a chamber music group, and we both made it. And so then we continued once a week to drive there and drive back to play in this group. So I got to know Daniel, but just in such a narrow way, being here. The gift of his death is this service. It's this service, thank you to his family, because I knew him through French and through music and through soccer, although that's very, we'll have to talk, Michael, because I can't quite put that together. We all played soccer, just pick up games and for fun. And this was back in 1981 and 2. But nonetheless, the thing that the gift of his death is that he never revealed himself. Daniel never talked about himself. It was through the causerie, our speaking French together, that I learned that he came and showed a picture with Niels Bohr. Did I say it wrong? Niels Bohr? I don't know where the S goes. I was just shocked and amazed. So nonetheless, the gift, thank you for the Rilke, especially Chris. The gift of his death is this service and to see all the facets of his life. Very enriching, and thank you. Thank you, Daniel.
Hello, my name is Frank Rimmert, and I was Dan's next door neighbor for the last 9 years of his life. I just want to say he was a loving and kind man, and just the best neighbor that I could ever have. And we loved each other. I felt a sense of peace when we were together. And we shared two very passionate desires. One is he loved the martinis that I made, and I loved him teaching me pétanque. And to his credit, he won the last game. And I just want to say thank you, Dan, for being in our lives. And thank you for all of his family for having this ceremony and sharing of his life. Bless you, Dan.
Voilà, le son est réactivé. Ils vont parler. Marc, tu nous entends?
Oui. Oui, Marie-Lise, nous t'entendons.
Je suis avec Olivier et on est très touchés de vous voir, de vous entendre et d'être avec vous. Merci beaucoup pour tout.
Alors, je suis avec Marie-Lise et je salue...
Attends, Olivier. Attends,
Attends, il faut
Just to translate, they're very happy to be here and happy to share and touched. This is Olivier is Dan's cousin and Marie-Lise is a cousin. Vas-y, Olivier.
Voilà, nous pensons à toutes les personnes présentes et si sympathiques et
Attends une seconde, Olivier.
Oui.
Attends, Olivier.
Oui.
Ah, vas-y, recommence.
C'est trop vite.
Voilà, Marie-Lise et moi sommes très heureux de vous regarder et j'ai un salut pour Philippe Waffeler Et on va rien ajouter parce qu'on est trop ému.
On vous embrasse très fort.
Translation, they were very touched. Merci, Marie-Lise et Olivier. Merci.
Et
I have
grâce
a
à,
feeling
grâce
this
au
is the
fait qu'on
first
ait eu
time we've
d'autres
ever
messages
had
dans les commentaires
France
pendant la-
in our. So thank you, Daniel,
C'est
and
gentil, vraiment,
Brendan
il
and the
était
technology team of Brendan and Brendan. Also
sauvé
Mark
la vie,
helping out with
Madeleine.
all this. Was there any other wants to share from here? Because you do have an opportunity to share with each other afterwards. I think it might be complete. So thank you to everyone who shared a memory, and there's more memories to be shared. We know that the love that we share with Daniel continues with Daniel and with one another, that we've grown in our time together. I love the analogies and the thoughts and the profound deepness of the gift of death and the other. Everybody brought part of Daniel's life here. He's a diamond, obviously, with many facets. And we got to see some of those, and I know there's many more. So we honor the grief process. We celebrate his passing. We still can miss him. And that's to be expected, not to push away, but feel the feelings. For me, grief is one of those things, you have waves, and you allow yourself to feel the feelings, because our grief is just an honoring of what we've shared and the love. If we didn't love, we wouldn't grieve, and we wouldn't shed those tears. So honor those tears and know that that too will pass in time. We can still have conversations with Daniel, and we can still imagine, because we have this great capacity to imagine and even perhaps even hear his voice in our heads. I would imagine that many of you can hear that, his phraseology or the tone of his voice. So grieve Daniel, but not for so long, to continue to celebrate that life and the gift of life and love and the death, what he has given to us all here today. We know that Daniel is quite vibrant in his next expression on the other side of the veil. And the only thing is that he's no longer bound by a body. He's free. When anyone leaves their body, I know that there's a freedom, unlimitedness. So in closing, I have a poem, and that you'll get an opportunity to participate in. It's called We Remember Him. So I'm going to say a phrase, and you all have the opportunity to say together, we remember him. In the rising of the sun and in its going down, we remember him. In the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember him. In the opening buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember him. In the blueness of the sky and in the warmth of summer, we remember him. In the rustling of leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember him. In the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember him. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember him. When we are lost and sick at heart, we remember him. When we have joys we yearn to share, we remember him. So long as we live, he too shall live, for he is always a part of us as we remember him. So I want to thank everyone here. You are precious. You are a part of Daniel. Okay, you carry Daniel's spirit with you, and he carries you with him. So we're going to close out this section of our service. I believe the slideshow will continue. If anyone wants to watch that, there's also some refreshments that you've so graciously supplied, and they look wonderful in the community room. So please continue to share. I also noticed up here there's a lot of pictures and various parts of Daniel's life, so you're welcome to come up here and look and treasure more of the memories and the celebration of his life. So I thank you, and continue as you do. Thank you so much.